We'll have families. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is 1:33. We're a few minutes already behind, but that is okay. We'll go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned just a second ago, my name is Kenny Lopez, and I serve as one of the assistant directors in student housing. More specifically, I'm assistant director in the Office of Residential Life. So I have a very, very quick PowerPoint here for folks. Most of the session was intended to be question and answer to help answer any questions that folks may have still lingering questions about leaving your student here on campus with us. As I mentioned, that's kind of what we'll do. Review a few key points to each student transition, and then more question and answer. All right, so first I'm going to start with our staffing pattern, so you all have an idea of who lives with your students in our residence hall. First and foremost, we have our residence director, which are our master's level live-in professional staff who live in every single one of our communities on campus. So this is an important person. If your student or yourselves want to meet, I would certainly encourage you to do so. Second, we have our ARDs, or assistant resident director, and these are students who are currently going through master's programs, so we consider this an apprenticeship for them going into the field of higher education. And last but certainly not least, we have our resident assistants, or RAs. These are all upper class students who physically have sat in their seats for the past 3.5 weeks and gone through pretty extensive training on a variety of different things. Mediation, crisis response, first aid, programming, transitioning to college, and all the other good things that happen in our foreign for students' transition to college. An important thing, I know folks hear this often, but I want to reiterate to folks, is FERPA. So FERPA is the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, which essentially for us means that we aren't able to give you much information. Okay? Sometimes parents are angry, they're like, well, I pay for their schooling. I understand that, but unfortunately we treat them as adults, and we will unfortunately respect their rights to their privacy. So in cases, we may not even tell you that they live on campus with us. So again, we encourage you to communicate with your student with a lot of the different pieces that come are involved with housing specifically. So I can talk more about FERPA here in a second, folks. Last or second, it's about partnership. So the Office of Residential Life, so we specifically work with the students. So we're not our maintenance team, we're not our assignments team, we're not the cashier folks. We're the ones who work directly with the students to help them in their transition to college. It's really important for us that we value the piece of being a partnership. If you come to us, how can I support my student? That is a great way of us working together to help your student be successful. We do that quite easily by asking you the questions. Has your son or daughter, your student, communicated with the roommate, the professor, their faculty members, whatever the case may be, academic advisors to be successful? So it is really, for us, one of the big components that we'll talk about regularly is communication. That is one of the most significant and important things that you can do with us, that we can do with you, as well as do with your student to help us in the transition to campus. Safety and security, we know that's our paramount priority for all of you as well as for us. As you all have seen, moving day is a little bit different, obviously, but we have a multi-location key swipe system. So students will typically have a variety of different places that they will use their key cards to go into the buildings, up to the elevators, staircases, into the rooms, the restrooms, things like that. So again, safety and security is very important to us. Hall staff do what we call community walks up every residence hall multiple times a night to ensure the safety and security of our communities. I just ran here from a previous orientation with all of your students, but we specifically note to them, there's more of them than there is of us. So we follow the same policy kind of that the airport does. You see something, you say something. So if they let us know that someone who looks like a college-age student is walking into the building, let us know. We will be more than happy to address it. Call our Department of Public Safety. Call 911 if you don't remember any other number, don't know what to do. Those are the things that we ask our students to do, to be mindful about their safety and security of themselves, as well as our community as a whole. We do have community standards, which are the rules and policies that we ask all students to abide by when they're living on campus with us. For example, one of the big ones is that after Sunday night, we will not allow any outside guests back into the residence hall. And this is once again, because of COVID, the numbers are still in that area that are a little uncertain, so we're asking please that people are respectful of that, and you can go to the door, drop off stuff to your son or daughter, your student, but that you please not go into the building after Sunday. So do everything before then or before Monday. Do that before, that will be greatly appreciated, as well as they cannot bring anyone else that, a friend from like key things like that into their building. If anyone lives on campus, they can enter and exit our buildings without any problem, then they must be escorted, but they can do that without any restriction. We also ask all of our students, obviously, to follow all university, state, and federal laws as obviously required. And in terms of if there is a policy or violation that does take place, we are an educational process. It is not something that is denoted on the transcripts and official or formal. We are an educational process, and this is a learning moment for them as much as we want it to be. So we'll have conversations with them in terms of if they do violate any of our community standard policies. Okay? So I rushed through a lot of that because I wanted the majority of this to be question and answer period. Do folks have any questions I can help answer right now? Yes, sir.
Is there an RA for every floor?
In which community? In Honolulu, yes, there is an RA for every single floor. So what we do is, depending on the class standing of the buildings, is how many RAs will be for them. So for example, in a Honolulu community, it's 126. So that is our lowest ratio because they are, I'll say, our neediest students, right? They're transitioning to college and they need a little bit more help. In our upper class communities where we have sophomores, juniors, seniors, graduate students, it will be a little bit higher, that ratio. But yes, there's an RA per floor. And in the case of Ilekua and Lima, you have an assistant residence director and a residence director in that hall. Yes, ma'am. For your hall, no. You're going to mail it to their student's name and the hall that they're assigned to. We have a system that we will input all of that into what we call notified, and the student will get the email. So just keep the address where your student lives. Yes.
And their room number?
You don't need the room number, but if you know it, you can ask. If you call us for that, we won't give it to you, but if you know it, you can put it on there. Of course, yes, ma'am.
Besides the roommate and the resident staff, is there anybody else that has access into their room?
So the question is, besides the roommate and the hall staff, is there other people who will have access to the room? At the moment, so it depends. So if they put in a service request as an example, and they need something fixed, that they will be given authorization to have maintenance go into the room to get that done. So in that case, yes. But is there other folks who have keys to go in there? No, they do not. We will typically try really, really hard to never go into the student's room without them being present. In case of an emergency, obviously, we will always follow our protocol, which is having 2 staff members go, knock on the door, announce ourselves 3 times before we ever key into any door. Yes?
Is there regular cleaning to like common areas?
Yes. There is regular cleaning to, oh, sorry, if you want to continue on, check another part to that?
Yeah, so like the kitchen is really filthy in one of the towers, so shouldn't it have to be more like cleaned in?
Sure to have, yes. So if you want to let me know which tower it is after the session, and I can certainly follow up on that. Again, we're not the maintenance team, so I can only relay your information back to our maintenance team, and we can certainly work on that.
There's regular maintenance?
There is regular, there is custodial staff that should be going into all community spaces. So the bathrooms, the kitchens, the hallways, all that community space, and cleaning that regularly, yes. Let's go up here first, and then we'll go to you, and then we'll come down.
If there's a repair needed, how does the student get that done?
Sure. If there's a repair needed, how does the student get that done? So the student needs to go to our website, which is manoa.hawaii.edu/housing. Under the communities tab, there is a section called service request. They can also talk to the RAs. The RAs know how to do this. They click that, and that's how they'll submit the service request. and letting us know what the problem is and things like that. And also it gives our maintenance staff permission to go into their space to get that issue fixed. There's one in the middle, and then I'll come back here. Yes, ma'am, the green.
Speaking of community spaces, there seem to be a lot of community spaces when I see that are like filled with stuff that don't seem to be set up. Are they going to get set up?
They will be set up right now, again, because we are in this flux of COVID, that we are still following the social distancing, not social distancing. We don't really know where we're at with that right now as a university. So once that gets settled, that will be set up into the traditional fashion of couches, furniture, study rooms, all of that will be set up, yes. Then I think the next one is here. The question was, typically what is a maintenance time frame? Typically, right now, obviously, it's gonna be a little bit longer than they want it to be, just because we just got 3,000 new students on campus. But typically, they like to give the student information within 24 business hours, letting them know the status of whatever the situation may be. A lot of the communication may be happening through the actual service request portal itself, where they will put notes down at the bottom that says, we're waiting for a contractor, we're waiting for a part, or it was already done, or whatever the case may be. So the students suggest that they check that, as that is typically the main method of communication taking place. If the student does notice or feel that it is not being addressed, please talk to hall staff, and we will figure out what we need to do to get someone's attention on that item as soon as possible. Yes.
Checking the paper, is there a document that always, whatever? When is that?
48 hours from them moving in, the room condition form.
Okay, so that's what you, if it's Tuesday, it has to be done.
They should do it soon, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that room,
That's on your housing.
that is, yes, or they got a 5 things to know before moving on campus sheet on move-in. At the bottom, there's a QR code. If they lost that, which move-in day was crazy, so if they lost that, just ask their RA or hall staff, then they can tell them where to find that, yes.
Questions, please.
We asked, say that again?
Can you repeat the questions, please?
Absolutely. So this question was specifically the room condition form, RCF is what we call it, that students were told to fill out. When is that due? So typically it's 48 hours after moving in. We strongly encourage students to please be very, very, very thorough with that. If something has a scratch or a mark, put that on there. So that at the end, within reason, obviously, like we're not talking like a pinhole, we're talking like something that could potentially be significant later on, so that they're not getting those for that. Okay? Yes. So if a student has already filled out the room condition form or RCF, can they update that? Yes. The question was specifically about Hollywood and the low rises, specifically in this case. So I asked that you please follow up with the RD in that community, Bryce. That was the first thing that you should do or have a student do, so that he can put eyes on that space and we can work with our maintenance team to address those issues. Because if the students don't say anything to us, we don't know. So I would encourage them to pester us as regularly as they possibly can, so that we can make sure that from our end that it gets done as well. Because the maintenance team has it on the docket, but sometimes again, they only get to so much. So that's why I encourage them to let Bryce, who is the RD for that community, know to get it fixed as soon as possible.
Just to help this woman that just asked that question, because there's a whole Facebook group going crazy over that.
Sure.
What abandoned last year and after, so it's really bad. But my daughter isn't in yet, so I don't know which one she's in. But as we did the tour, I walked over there, and there's two guys over there, bleeding out seriously, lower lungs. They were taking stuff out seriously. So it was nice to see.
Thank you. Well, let's go here and then we'll go back to, yes, go ahead. Sure. So the question is, if there's an emergency on campus, what is the nearest safe space? So it depends on the situation. So that's how we will typically approach it. So our university is not, we don't make decisions alone. So we have folks from our Department of Public Safety that work with HEMO, which is the Hawaii Emergency Response Team, that works with the state folks, that works with everyone to make that decision on what needs to happen. If there is a situation as a hurricane, for example, depending on the category of hurricane, depending on where it's at and what its trajectory is what will decide what's going to happen. If it's a tropical storm, typically we'll say shelter in place. If it is something else, we will say go to the interior stairwells of your building. We will let folks know once we know that situation, if it's something that we can plan to prepare for. So all of that stuff, I believe parents can't get this, but the students will have access to the DPS alerts, which we talked to them about this morning, so they will know if there's an active shooter on campus, any sort of threat in the area, they will know to shelter in place, seek refuge, to do those kind of things on campus. Did that answer your question? Sure. So there hasn't been that situation, but we will, again, if there is a fire, there will be an emergency plan that comes into place on where the students will live, if that's the case, or where to go. Yes. The question was, what do we do in the evacuation? Do we have accountability for all the students, making sure where they're at, what they're doing? The last hurricane scare we had about 3-4 years ago at this point, we literally went door to door, figured out what the students were doing. If they were local students and they were going home, we would note that. If they were going to stay on campus, we would note that so that we knew exactly where students were and what their plan was going to be. So some students who are from the continent and have roommates who are local, they would just go to their family's house, which is fine, but we just wanted to know where the students were, if they were going to stay on or not. Yeah, I'll go to him and then I'll come to you.
In case of an emergency, something were to happen, how would the students find out when they're in their dorms, aside from text messaging?
Sure.
Like, does the building have an intercom system or anything where it's live and not just a horn or a recording?
Sure. Do our buildings have intercom systems? We do not have intercom systems unless there's a fire, right? So the fire alarm to say there's a fire been reported, get out, similar to what movie theaters, malls, large spaces have those. That's about the only intercom system that we do have in our communities. Typically, students are more up to date with what's happening really than a lot of us because of social media, really. Though they have their own group chats, their own ways of communicating. A lot of RAs have group meetings with their students or ways of communicating. So we will alert them that way, one. Two, if there is a tsunami warning, the city and county do have, or state actually for that matter, has an alarm that surrounds, that literally is loud. And you can hear it everywhere. Folks are laughing because they've heard it before. And you will know to seek higher ground and do things like that, which on our campus we are above the floodplain, so we are in a safe place here. But those things will be noted. Again, that's what we encourage students to do the emergency alert through GPS so that they were able to get that text message or alert if something is out of the normal in the surrounding area. Yeah, a little.
How does the trash collection work? Two questions actually.
Yeah.
How does trash collection work? And the third floor showers, but are we saying that aside from it being not very sanitary state, that I guess the drain is flooded and water's flowing all through the bathroom?
Okay.
Who does she go to address that?
Okay, so I would encourage you to go to your hall staff for the second part of that question, letting either Julian or Yukilani know about that specifically, or the RA. for the third floor, and they will address that situation right away. In terms of the refuse that is collected, right now it should be done every single day because of movement. There's a lot of garbage, a lot of things that you recycle, things like that. But that is typically done three days a week. It's done Monday, Wednesday, Friday, typically by our contractor, which is Western Oahu Aggregate.
Like, did they take their trash cans and place it outside the room?
No, so that, they're responsible for doing that. So they will take their bag of trash or whatever it is, and take it downstairs to the dumpster or the trash chute, depending on where they live. So there's no one going into their space, they're responsible for that. Yeah. 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 Yes. That is correct. So we will, so we won't be able to tell you when the student decided to go. We have a list, we will determine where students are going, if they're saying what that looks like, we will do all of that. But unfortunately, we won't be, if you call us asking us, hey, where did Mahea go? I won't be able to tell you that, unfortunately, yeah. Yes. 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 No. So that's a little confusing. So the confidential form, so there's a confidential contact. Yep. So that's a variety of different things here, right? So we have FERPA, right? And then we have an emergency contact, and then we have a confidential contact. Okay? So the emergency contact, again, is something that the student filled out when they filled out their housing application. The confidential contact is something that is sent out from our housing department at a later date. It's going to be sent out on Tuesday, I believe, is when we send that out. And that's for students who put in case they do go missing, in case there is an emergency, who they want to be contacted. Okay? So that does, it can be the same person as the emergency contact, or it can be someone different. Okay? We still won't be able to tell you, no. So if you want a parent, if a student wants a parent to be notified of information, they need to sign a FERPA waiver. FERPA, FERPA waiver. Yes, ma'am.
So if some of our community are there,
Yeah.
and their phones are not working, do you guys have a phone where they can call school and say they're okay?
Yes. Yes.
I noticed this week there's a pretty rigorous set of social activities on
That's
there.
correct. Mhm.
After this week, is there more of that kind of stuff, or what's the social stuff you organize for the kids?
Sure. So the question was, again, to repeat it, so this week we have a pretty rigorous set schedule of program events, which are the Healthy Week of Welcome. So what happens after this week? After this week, there will be a set, it depends on a variety of different things. So one, each RA is responsible for having 3 events per month on their floor. So one of them is a small scale, so it's for the floor. Another one is for their hall or tower. The other one is a larger scale for the entire building. So, and the students can go to anything that they see, read, or find out about. So they do have pretty rigorous events throughout. We do 3 per floor in order to make sure the students are still going to classes, are still being focused on all of those pieces, but still having some sort of a social outlet, if you will. So we also have, obviously, athletic events, we have intramural sports, we have a lot of those other things that students can actively get involved in and participate in that are outside of specific things that the RAs put together. Let's go to the gentleman in the black, and then we'll go to you.
So I asked a question earlier about the wellness check.
Yeah.
I believe. In case, for whatever reason, us parents haven't communicated with our, adult kid in a week's time, and for whatever reason my kid didn't go to class, is there like a certain time frame that is standard for the school to say, hey, this kid's been absent in every class, something might be wrong? Is there something as a standard that you guys will automatically go and do a wellness check on them? If for whatever reason, just us parents didn't communicate for an extended amount of time?
So I don't know the answer to the academic part. I'm going to ask Dr. Sabina Falaho who needs in to help me with that part. But in terms of the housing part, I'll answer that for you. So you can always call our office and say, look, I haven't spoken to my student in a week. Can someone please do a wellness check? We will absolutely do that. We'll ask for their name. And we will go into, we will start our process essentially, so we will go to the room, we will knock on the door, and we will see if they're there, they're asleep, if their phone died, they lost their phone at the beach, whatever the case may be, right? We will ask them, hey, can you please call your parent, family member, so on and so forth. The problem there typically lies that we can't tell you that we talked to them because of FERPA. We will tell them, please call your parent, and we'll typically stand there and watch them dial and call you. Once you answer, we'll leave. But whether they do it or don't, that's then up to you all, right? So that's what our policy is. If we can't get a hold of the student, then we will start what we call our missing persons process, which we'll start looking at key locks, we will start looking at meal swipes, we'll start looking at social media, we'll start doing all of that on our end. Again, we can't notify you what we're doing, but we will start our own process. The university does have a time frame where if we haven't reached out to them, then we notify the authorities that said person is missing, or we can't find them, here's what we've done, and then they will potentially contact parents. We won't.
But that's after we've made an attempt to
Yes.
have that wellness check.
Yes.
So my question is there something that is a standard check in case a kid hasn't reported to class in 2 weeks and we haven't had a communication for whatever that reason may be?
Most classes don't take attendance. This is not high school, unfortunately. Some classes are 2 people large, some classes are 300 people large, right? So it honestly just depends. So I don't think that there is not a process from the university standard way that we do that, unfortunately. Because they all vary. Yeah. I'm going to go to the woman in the white who was